good to go. Well, welcome everybody. It's been a while since I've been here, Pheng, he, him, his, with the Men of Masculine Folks Network here, and along with me are Sean and Serrano, as well as our tech support and background logistical person, Julianna, being on Facebook. It's been a while since we've all been together, so perhaps we go around and see how everybody's doing before we dive into our conversation today, and just do intros again as well too.
Cool, I got you. Hello, my name is Serrano Robinson. I use he, him, his pronouns. Out of Duluth currently, and I'm doing well. Just kind of adjusting energy to the shift of seasons right now. So I could have said a paragraph, but I felt like that one line was smooth and it covered it all. But yeah, just got a little cold, but just kind of getting through the change of seasons right now. So I'm doing good and just adjusting to that. So
right on. And I'm Sean, he, him, his. Also coming to you from Duluth, where it's super foggy, and that kind of is matching a little bit my energy as well. I think it's been foggy here for the last couple of days, and also just, yeah, definitely relating to Serrano, what you're sharing about like the change of the seasons. We've had sicknesses coming in and out of our house and family, and so yeah, just trying to make it through and stay as healthy as possible, but definitely glad to be back here with all y'all.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm doing pretty well, getting settled in here. I just came back from a conference this morning from Vegas, so it was a red eye. So being here is exciting because I want to make sure I make it here, since it's been a while since I was on Kitchen Table Conversations. Missed the last two great conversations with two really awesome people, both Yvette and Lena, and I saw it as well too. So wanted to say that you all did great. And Lena and Yvette, thank you so much for joining us in the last two conversations as well too. So I guess today, this month, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? So we wanted to make space and make time to really talk about what that means and what that looks like for us as men and masculine folks. So I think we'll go there and then see where the conversation takes us. And then from there, I know that we all read an article that I shared with all of you about a week ago on what they titled it as, like there's a lot of lonely men out there in the world. That's what they said, if I'm remembering the article correctly, and that is a big sort of quote unquote threat to society at the moment. And then I just read an article, I think about a day ago, around how many single men there are as well too, who are by themselves. And so really wanting to explore that kind of conversation of what that actually looks like, what that means, the nuances around that, what we as men and masculine folks should be doing with regards to things like that as we notice those things, or if those things are actually true or not. And so going back to my original thing is like, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so this month, it's always a time, not only should we be thinking about domestic violence only in October, but I think we should be thinking about it every day, as most of us here do, because of the work that we do or the way in which we engage and build communities. We think about domestic violence and all the survivors who have courageously opened up the conversations and paved the way for some justice and some remedies and some visibility for survivors of domestic violence and victims of domestic violence for the last 30, 40 years in this country, right? So I think it's probably like 40 years or 50 years by now. But it's still not that long ago, right? Where domestic violence was hush hush. It was like still, it's that couple's issue. We shouldn't talk about it, or it's our neighbors, or we shouldn't intervene. And I think that that's still there. And I think that that's why there's so many domestic violence that is still underreported in our communities. And that's why it's still so vitally important to keep raising awareness around domestic violence and what that actually entails and what it looks like, to continue to talk about it, bring some light to it as well too. So I sort of wanted to start it there and see what the two of you have to also share as well too, with regards to how you came into a relationship with understanding about domestic violence and whatnot.
Well, I know for me, kind of brought to mind when I first got into doing this kind of work, and just how little I actually knew about like what domestic violence is, what it looks like. I think, you know, Pheng, you mentioned nuances earlier, and just how many different nuances there are in communities, in different kinds of relationships, and different kinds of families and cultures and backgrounds. And yeah, I think I just really believed kind of the myths that are out there, that it's just, you know, like you said, like it's just not happening that much, and when it is happening, like it's, you know, it's not my place to get involved or to, you know, say anything to those people experiencing it, or actually using violence if they're, you know, the ones. But I just remember like early on when I had started working with men as peacemakers, there were just tons of people that I knew who, you know, when they found out what kind of work I was doing and what I was doing, they came to me and they shared their stories and they disclosed, you know, that they had experienced violence, and all of the stories were so, you know, unique and different. And yet just like, I think it really shocked me that I personally knew so many people, because at the time, you know, like that was my belief, was like, well, yeah, some families probably deal with this, but I just didn't think it was super pervasive. And so I think just really eye-opening in those first couple of months of like doing this kind of work, and doing a lot of learning about what it looks like and feels like, sounds like, and it's just been a continued, you know, learning process for me as well. Like I was just sharing with Julianna before we were live here that it's been almost 5 years that I've been working with men as peacemakers, and I feel like I still, you know, don't have a super good grasp on how to describe it to just any person, you know, a friend who asks like, what is domestic violence, what does it look like? Like I think you can just answer that question so many different ways, is what I've learned. And yeah, I guess the other thing that kind of came to mind too, which I'm curious to hear what y'all think about, is just like, you know, reports of like domestic violence and violence within homes and families rising, you know, especially within the last 18 months, almost 2 years of families being together all the time, and experiencing more of that in their homes. And so I think it's really important for us to discuss and hopefully bring some light to others who might be watching this and wondering like, is this really an issue? Or you know, so I guess I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Sean. For me, as far as like kind of this work, or just like domestic violence in general, like my experience, like it comes like from being a child, like just years of experience of seeing it and like being a part of it, and just kind of watching it go down, and kind of, yeah, honestly, for lack of words, like choosing which route I wanted to take. Like, and I think that's also an important fact that people actually don't talk about, is like when there are children like prevalent, or when there are children in the home during this time, like what they're actually enduring when they see that. What do they actually endure, like when they're watching their mom or their parents or their guardians like be put in those situations, through rigorous and consistent harm. I think like the kids, it's like a split personality, to where like if you have two kids, one will be the one where he or she or they never wants to see that again, and the other one, or he or she or they will just continue it throughout of the modeling that they've seen. So that's been my experience, sadly, like growing up in the project, is just seeing it be modeled more and more after like families, right? Like I watched my mom like go through that like a ton, but it also, for me, it was the good, like, and not even good or bad. It was the, how do I even say this? Like, this is the flick that I would have rather taken. Like, I took the fact of understanding like why it happened, what she actually went through. But I can't say the same for others. Like a lot of people that I know, like turned to model that. Like that was the norm in families, was to do that. So that's just my experience with it. Sadly, is like as a kid watching it and like kind of determining like why do people treat. And I think that's why I always had that question, like why do people treat people like the way that they do? I think it always stemmed from me watching people like and then having to endure it myself. Um, as far as like, I think the other half of that or the other part of that question, um, I think y'all hit some like really, really like deep points. Like the biggest one is like that people feel like they should like mind their business or things like that. Like that's really weird. And it seems like people are like nosy for everything else until it comes to shit like that. Like when you think about it, like y'all know me, I like speak in tongues, so I kind of move around, but I mean that in a serious way. Like people will be in your business about small and stupid shit, like, you know, before they're in your business about something that can actually save your life. Um, and I also do think like that terminology of what domestic violence is like so non-existent, right? Like the conversation around it, like people, sadly, some people just don't think that that's, like Sean said, that's even a thing, right? Like people wouldn't even think that that's capable of other human beings to do until you see it or until you're told about it. Um, so I think that, and another fact I was thinking about is, um, hold on, now I'm losing it, so I'm trying to catch on to it before it slips. Is that it sometimes it's, I guess a lot of times, like when I think people like try to fall back because they see it as like a back and forth, when in all reality it's not that. It's not. They always think like, oh, somebody gonna get the upper hand, or they just in there. I think the midst of shit what people think about domestic violence is they just like hear stuff and they're just like, oh, they probably just throwing glass bottles back and forth. You know how the movies are and shit, like how the movies or just media in general always have a shitty fucking way of portraying what people go through in real life. I think that's what also helps is like people would think like, oh yeah, it's just them two going at it again. And that's the so beautiful, that's so fucked up because like it's not just them going at it again, it's that person using that as a form of dominance. So I could actually explain it for some reason and it may be wrong, but I'd be thinking like domestic violence is out of that use of force, that use of dominance, that use of the use of dominating other people to feel better for yourself, especially in an intimate relationship where it's actually going to work, where that person actually loves you. So that way it's harder for them to leave. Like when you think about friends, you'll leave your friend before you leave your partner because you'll have that closer love. You'll have that more intimate, like I'll actually swapping bodily, let's get weird, like I actually swapping fluid. So it's a deeper energy, it's a deeper connection. So I think like with domestic violence, like people always think it's just back and forth when in our reality, no, it's one person sadly, or one person using like either what they learned or what they've gathered to control that person, and then that person just modeling the same thing to them, right? Because that also happens in domestic violence relationships where he or she or they gets fed up and they start using the exact same model that was used against them. Now that's their sacred level of like surviving, and I understand that, but that's also doing like exactly what was done to them, if that makes sense. Like I'm not clearly not trying to say like the person who is the victim in that case uh shouldn't like protect themselves. Of course they should be the most protected. I think, I mean, people think that or that just happens to where there's like a, people think it's like a shift into where someone else has like a form of like power, and it's not that. Like that one woman or that one person is just using what she learned sadly from the person she's looking across from the table. um he gets upset and yells at her, so she does it back. Like that's not even like, and people would think, oh, that's going back and forth. Like that's not it. That person who's reacting to it never was actually like that and never wanted to be like that, never had those intentions. The person who's controlling had those intentions of controlling, dominance. I need this person to be where they're at, or I need this person to be where I want them to be at this moment in time and do these things. So I think one of the weirdest things is that we always think it's some back and forth shit, like, oh, they're just going at it again, and that becomes the culture. Like they're at it again, and it's not that. Um, it's more deeper than that. So I don't know, like, yeah. But sometimes when you don't know, or when you don't like see it too, you kind of don't think it's like real. And I think there's like a big population of people who probably don't see it as true. They could like look inward and see that everything is like kosher, and then just, you know, assume that that's like that for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that you brought up a lot of great points there, Serrano, and if I could piggyback on it, I think what it brings to mind for me is what makes it domestic violence is the pattern of control, the pattern of wanting to be in power, in charge, quote unquote, the pattern of trying to minimize one's own responsibility and one's own accountability in the relationship, like that it has nothing to do with me. If only my partner or my wife or whoever the case may be is behaving this way, then I wouldn't be like this. I wouldn't be so upset like this, or I wouldn't be so pissed off like this. And so I think that there's a couple layers to it, is to make it even more nuanced, to go beyond they're just fighting. The they're just fighting is that we recognize that in every relationship, there's going to be arguments, there's going to be fights, right? But how you do it actually matters, and how it comes about actually matters. And to be able to see those fights over and those arguments over a period of time allows us to actually see and understand whether that relationship has a violence pattern or has a pattern of control and power in it, or does it not, right? And then there's actually the other part of it is that there's actually some benefit to that use of violence, right? To that use of power, meaning that most of the time it's the male identified person in the relationship that actually receives the benefit of somebody submitting to their will, somebody submitting to what it is that he wants, right? And doing what it is that he wants. And then I think the other part of it is that people think that, I think there's still a huge misunderstanding that domestic violence is only when it's physical, because that's how the state statute defines it, right? It's physical only, or when there's a murder only or domestic homicide happening only, then we're like, oh, it's a domestic violence, right? Homicide. And that's not necessarily the case all the time. There are many other ways in which domestic violence actually occurs through financial abuse, through emotional abuse, through psychological abuse, through using children to abuse and to be in power. So there's a lot of that. And I think the other part of it is like, I would say that it is just inherent, even in our conversations over the past year and a half here, is that it is inherent in the system that we live in and in the society that we live in, where we praise and we give benefit of the doubt and we give a lot of leeway for men and masculine folks when they're feeling upset and taking care of them, right? So it's so complex. I think that's what I'm also wanting to name, is that not only is it so nuanced, but it is so complex to actually understand domestic violence to its depth and its core. And I think that at times could be overwhelming for couples and for people in the community and for people in family. And so what I've come to understand is that there are many families that actually understand when domestic violence is actually happening with their loved ones. The challenge is them not knowing how to actually then address that violence. How do they do that in ways where, to Serrano's point earlier, where the kids are going to be safe? How do they do that in a way where the survivor is actually being, the violence is actually happening to them on a daily basis, is safe and isn't going to get injured more, right? So there's a lot of that, and I think that we have to actually learn to combat and navigate that violence when it actually happens. Because I think that, and this may be quote unquote pushing the boundaries, or may feel tensious. But I think in working with men, and I think in working with men and masculine folks who have caused harm, domestic violence over the years, what I've come to understand is that some of those men may not believe that they are in control, may not believe that they are wanting power, right? They don't see that pattern that they're doing, right? Or they don't recognize that pattern. And this is not to scapegoat their behavior. This is not to excuse that. But I think that that's why it's so important to actually educate and to raise awareness about domestic violence, not only to people who are impacted by it on a daily basis, but to the people who are actually involved in it, who may not actually understand and know that what I'm doing is domestic violence. How I'm behaving is domestic violence. How I'm moving is domestic violence, right? Because in the thick of it, to Serrano's point there, and then I'll be quiet here because I'm sure there's a lot of thoughts that the two of you have at this moment, is that in the thick of it, all we see when it comes to intimate relationship is truly the saying of it takes two to tango. That narrative and that saying of it takes two to tango is still so vast and is still dictating and is still telling us how we respond to domestic violence, right? Because then it makes us not see the power, it makes us not see the control pieces. It just makes us see like, well, she was throwing pots and pans too. And, you know, he was doing it. So it becomes this like the chicken or the egg conversation, which came first, who did what first, you know, and trying to figure out the who did what first. And then it becomes a really philosophical conversation. Then it turns into the larger conversation of like, well, women abuse men too, and men abuse women too, and so on and so forth, right? Which doesn't help actually us understand the complexities around domestic violence that we're talking about here.
I think just, yeah, naming the complexities, or at least some of them, right? I mean, that it takes two to tango. Holy crap. Like that phrase alone, like I hadn't even thought about that, Peng, but like things like that. There are so many things like that so many of us grew up just sort of like these blanket statements that are sort of supposed to like absolve, you know, one person of you know, it's like we can't actually like hold this one person accountable for the harm that they're causing, like, because then we'd be like pointing fingers and like, is it fair, is it equal, is it, you know, all of those sort of questions. And it feels really yucky to me, I mean, I guess. And that, you know, another thought that I was having as both of you were sharing was like how easy it is for my brain to just like stay up here and think about all of these like philosophical questions, like, right, like of, well, you know, it's not just him, like she does this, women, you know, and it is sort of the snowball of like ignoring survivors who are saying this is a regular thing. You know, it's not just every time we're both engaging equally in this violent sort of relationship, right? It's you know, just from what I've learned about domestic violence, it's like it is usually one person experiencing harm and violence over a course of many, many, many years, you know, and then when that person finally, you know, is able to stand up and defend themselves, then it's like, oh, they're the ones, you know, they're the one who did, you know, committed this murder or this, you know, whatever. And it's like people want to put their judgment on, you know, who was right, who was wrong, who was the bad guy, so to speak. And it also has me thinking about like how oftentimes those sort of like bad guys, the people who are causing harm, like we know it's primarily men, cisgender, heterosexual men who are causing this harm. Of course, there are all kinds of violence that happen in different kinds of relationships as well. But, you know, thinking about that notion that it is primarily men, cisgender men causing harm, it's like, well, we can't actually address that issue if we're just like absolving everyone and it takes two to tango. Like, but this thing is a real thing that men are causing, you know, I don't know what the percentages are now, you know, but 90+% of violent, you know, encounters, I believe, are caused by men. And one other thing that I was thinking about too that I'll throw out is just kind of around the complexities of like, it's really easy to like look at like one violent incident and be like, okay, we know what was happening here, and try to dissect that one thing. But as we sort of like take a bigger, or like kind of zoom out, I guess, and like look at the relationship as a whole, look at the individuals within the relationships and what sort of their like expectations are of their partners, what they expect their, you know, female or women identified partner to do to like basically just make us comfortable. You know, I think, you know, when I kind of zoom back out on my own relationship, I see that too, where it's like so many of our fights, you know, our arguments, our heated moments in our relationship has been when I have felt wronged, or like I have been made to feel uncomfortable, or something is pushing my boundaries a little bit. And oftentimes when I can really like actually zoom out and look at that, it's like, dang, that was actually really selfish of me to like have this expectation that like my partner, my wife should do these things for me. And if she doesn't, I'm going to respond violently, or I'm going to respond by like yelling at her or gaslighting her, or like all of these different tactics that I think people are using like every day. We're sort of taught how to do that, but like no one ever explained to me what gaslighting was. And I for sure have gaslit my partner and partners in the past, you know, and so some of these behaviors I think are so ingrained in the way that we grow up, in the way that we see, you know, men and women, and like our roles within relationships, and this whole concept of like gender equity, like, you know, like my wife and I, that's our goal, right? Is to have this relationship that feels like there's gender equity. It feels like it's sort of like an equal partnership, but like we don't have a lot of examples to look to of like, how do you do that? Like, you know, it's just oftentimes I think so many of our backgrounds are you know, they have these roles that are just so clearly defined between men and women, and like who's doing what and who's allowed to do what. And I don't know. So I just think it's interesting to sort of zoom back and be like, how does someone get to that point of like using the physical violence? Like it doesn't start that way. I think in most cases, I think it starts with, well, I expected you to have dinner on the table for me when I got home from work, and now I'm mad because I'm uncomfortable. I might have to actually like do something, be a part of making that dinner happen, or, you know, whatever it is. So it's like looking at those smaller things, like if we can step it back a little bit and see like what led to this moment of like physically hurting my partner, someone who I, you know, say that I love, that I'm committed to, that I, you know, have these romantic feelings for, or whatever. How do we get to that place if we can step it back?
Yeah, I think if I could share just some things that you're bringing to light too, Sean, there is that there's a distinguishment between some of us, right? Some of us not engaging in domestic violence and the pattern of power and control in our relationships. And yet we understand that the behavior that we do contributes to that male supremacy, that male domination, that worshiping of men in our society, that caretaking of men in our society. And so that's the distinguishment that I want to name here in terms of what you're sharing, is that though the way in which you are talking about being in a relationship with your partner and your wife is not and may not be domestic violence, the way in which you are behaving and moving contributes to the atmosphere, to the climate, to the environment that allows for domestic violence to actually manifest, come to fruition, not by you, but through other men and through other masculine folks in society, right? And so I think that that's the important part for us to distinguish here, is that It takes a lot of intentionality to actually unlayer and unpack the way in which we as men and masculine folks have been socialized to behave and to think about how others should then care for us. And so in practicing being healthy, it's not going to mean that these arguments are going to go away all of a sudden. It's not going to mean that we're going to be all frolicking in the wood all of a sudden, right, with our partners, and it's just going to be this peaceful harmony, Atlantis paradise. No, that's not real. And to say that to ourselves is to kid us of the way in which we as human beings are in relationship to one another, that we will have conflict and that we will have arguments and that we will, but how do we do that in a way where we don't actually try to control the entirety of the situation or the other person? How do we do that in a way where we're not saying, well, I am the man here, you need to listen, you need to just do what I'm saying you do, right? Like where you're asking other people, not only asking, requesting and emboldening yourself to say, you need to meet my demands. And if you don't, there's going to be consequences to it. Because I know that if I use violence, whatever means it is, whether it is physical, emotional, whatever, over a period of time, people aren't going to say anything because they just believe and think that this is the normal course of our relationship, right? So that's the piece that I think is so nuanced in what you're sharing that I wanted to like tease out and pull out more so that those who are engaging in this conversation with us, and men and masculine folks who are engaging in this conversation with us, could really distinguish, like, am I doing that? And in how I'm behaving and how I'm moving, am I moving in a way that's actually contributing to the domestic violence? Or am I participating in domestic violence? So that I can understand, right? But it's a continuous learning journey for us to keep unlayering those things and to keep questioning in a deeper sense for our own selves of like, why am I thinking this way? Why am I believing this, right? What's driving me to that place and what's moving me towards that place? And oftentimes it is really, it boils down to our masculinity. It boils down to our manhood. It boils down to, if I don't do this, what does it mean for me as a man, right? What does it mean for me? And all of those things, regardless of whether we engage in domestic violence or not, contributes to the violence against women and girls in our communities.
It's very true. And then it's never recorded, right? Because it's technically not illegal. So I think that's it. That's probably the like groundbreaking point that both of you have like really put out there very clearly. It's like those steps beforehand that like people don't see or don't acknowledge. Like that is, yeah. Trying to control your partner at any moment, and especially when that's a reoccurring thing, is domestic violence right then and there, right? But we only see it when there's a mark, there's a bruise, there's a report, and even reports, right? Like there's some dudes that, don't get me wrong, like I say this like with authenticity 1,000%, but there's some dudes who don't even go through the system, right? There's sometimes where the cops get called, the authorities get called, and nothing fucking happens, and the person's right back in the home with the same person that he just committed this offense on. So I think that's the biggest part, is that education on like on those before steps. Like those before steps are like wanting to know, you know, for your control where your partners are and where they're going at what time. Like that's a part of that. And if that person decides to ever say, hey, I don't think this is right, that's when it will actually escalate. So that's the part that like we forget. Like it's a fear of escalation too, right? It's a fear of like, oh damn, sadly I already know damn well that I shouldn't even go against what this person is saying, or I shouldn't buy that. All right, bet, cool. And we forget that that's domestic violence. We think it's domestic violence when he goes, hey, I don't think you should buy this, and then, you know, she goes, well, I think I should because this is my money, I work for it, and then he decides to raise his voice, and then he puts his hands on it, and then we land at this like beautiful, for some reason, perfect spot to where, oh, we're seeing that it exists now. But like y'all both said, it's the pattern. It's the, I need to be in front, in control, like it's them shit that we even see in movies, right? Like it's my way or the highway. Like that is the message. Like we even, like there's even movie shit that like we like, idolize that is domestic violence. Like telling somebody my way or the highway, so there's no fucking room for communication, like at all, like none, like not even a little bit, like that's controlling. So I think like y'all hit those. I think I'm basically just reiterating exactly what y'all just said. In beautiful, like I said that both in beautiful ways of those before steps actually being it too, and naming those. And yeah, like I grew up seeing violence as hitting somebody. That's it, nothing more, and for damn sure nothing less. Sadly, so Sean, it is really about that. Like you said about the education on like what does domestic violence mean to me, right? Like what does it mean? Like what is it, you know, vocabulary wise, like is it being used? You know, so I think like y'all hit some really good points on education. And we could educate them on, yeah, those, I think those before steps were just the crucial ones, because Sean hit it on the head. Like some people don't, well, one of you said it, I'm starting to mix it up, but when people don't like, some people are not even aware, right? And I think about those little boys who see it, and it just embraces their entire body to the point where, just like Pheng said, they no longer even see that this shit is prevalent. This is just a regular life from what they've lived and what they've. So that was so beautiful the way you said that, because like it definitely answers the question of like that child that I just asked about. It's like that's what happens, right? Like when you're a child and it's not talked about, and like it's for damn sure not educated on at all, like it just becomes a part of you, sadly. Because there's some people who can name it and still do it, but there are literally some people out there who just like they'd have to like not get slapped, but like hit with all the education and be like, oh damn, all those things was wrong, and it was controlling, and it was me trying to dominate. So I think that was a beautiful point, like just talking about the education outside of physical violence, maybe even just separating those, like physical violence and violence are two separate things, like, you know. So
Yeah, I think about in all of what we're talking about here, that what's coming to my mind as you were sharing this, Serrano, is like, this is why I think it's so important for us to, when we talk about ending violence in our communities, that for me, it is so vitally important that that conversation about ending violence in community cannot be exclusive to what happens outside of our homes only, to the violence that we experience outside of our homes only. Whether it is being robbed, whether it is being name called, whether it is racist, racial violence, whether it is white supremacy violence, whatever the case may be, right? Police violence. All of that violence cannot be talked about in its own exclusivity about it happening outside of our homes only. We have to make sure that the conversation of domestic violence is in conjunction and in parallel and intersecting to that of those conversations that we are having about community safety and community violence. And why that's so crucial, is so important, is because we may settle and be able to navigate the violence that is out there in community, right? But we know that there's some folks who aren't safe in their homes. We know that there are some folks who don't want to even be in their homes and in their relationships or in their bodies. For some sexual violence survivors, they're not even safe in their own bodies. So why are we, and how can we talk about community violence if we don't talk about those pieces in conjunction to that? So I've been advocating and talking about it the last couple of, every time I have an opportunity to be in community, ending community violence and bringing about community safety. And I always am like, we have to have the conversation about what's happening in our homes. Are we just so afraid to name our fathers and our grandfathers and our uncles, you know, as the people who can cause harm? Are we that afraid to name that they can? Are we afraid to be able to see them as that? And I know most of us don't want to see those folks that we love as harm doers or people who can cause harm, but they are. And they can then, and yet they could still be our fathers, and yet they can still be our grandfathers, right? And so I think it's so complex, is that the larger, and what happens in community violence is a manifestation of domestic violence in the intimate home setting. And domestic violence is the manifestation of community violence. They don't exist in silos. Those two forms of violence aren't just happening by themselves. One happens over here and the other. And why I say that is because women of color, especially Black women, trans Black women, gender nonconforming Black women, are the one who experience both forms of violence. And both forms of violence, whether it is in the home or outside of the home, comes from a domination system place, comes from a supremacy place, comes from a very patriarchal place. And so that is why we have to talk about that and how these two forms of violence actually meet and propel one another to hinder the lives and make more detriments to the lives of survivors and victims in our community. And so I wanted to really lift that piece up because I think that there's so many of us in our community, I think, that are worried about crimes and community safety. That's all great. But if you can't even talk about the safety in your own home, and you can't even address the domestic violence that is actually happening in your own home, what good is there to talk about community safety? And what good is there to talk about community violence? At least that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking about that safety piece too, because I was thinking about, for those people who are experiencing domestic violence, like what are the safety things in place for them within the community? Like, you sort of, I feel like the general population, people who don't necessarily have the education and the awareness around these issues to understand that there are so many complexities. It's like I think of people in my family or friends who would say, well, yeah, of course, if something was happening to me, I would call the police. And then for those of us who do this work, we know that that is not usually a reliable source of safety for the survivors, the victims of the violence. Oftentimes these people are not even prosecuted with the criminal justice system. And so I think, yeah, it's interesting what you're talking about, because it's like, if we can't have an honest conversation about what's happening in our homes and our families without that shame, without the embarrassment, or like, feeling like we're being disloyal, or, like there's so many things, I think, reasons why people don't talk about it. But then to not even know, like, who can I trust within the community? Who do I go to for help? Who can actually help me out of this situation? Or, I just think about that too, on the side of survivors having, like, we sort of put the onus on them to, like, well, of course you should have left. Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you do these things? And it's like, because it's oftentimes not safe, and it's not, it doesn't actually provide a solution. And so then when you think about just like how much domestic violence is happening kind of all the time within communities across the world, I would say, it just feels like such a huge issue that we're sort of quietly like, well, we'll have this, awareness month in October. We'll talk about it once a month, and we'll tell people the police are here to keep you safe, and we'll, show up and help you. And yet, I don't know, in my experiences of people who have caused harm, those people are well known in the community. They're trusted. They're people that are viewed as like good guys, who would never do that. So, how do we actually address the violence, and like what leads men and masculine people to like committing the violence? And also, like, what does it look like for communities to come in and try to keep these survivors safe too? Like, it's just not like, there doesn't seem to be a good system, right, that actually works, that actually provides safety for all people, like, and I think white supremacy and racism and all of these things come into play too, because, who are these perfect victims who we actually do believe, right? White women who come forward and say, this person of color, this Black man, this, like, we're very quick to believe those people, right? But as you're saying, Pheng, like, no no one outside of, the trans community is talking about the like epidemic of murder and violence that Black trans women face every day, like just walking out their doors and hoping to come home alive, to their families. And so yeah, I mean, I guess these conversations are like helpful, and at the same point it's like, when does it actually shift? Like, how do we make that shift, right? How do we actually like take it from conversations to like, actually the people in our communities are becoming more safe, like we're actually doing the work, we're changing hearts and minds, or whatever that, whatever sort of metaphor you want to use. But how and like where do we see this happening? Where, like, is anyone in the world doing a good job with this, and how can we learn from those folks? How can we, actually look at different ways of keeping our communities safe?
I think that one of the things that I want to lift up in what you were sharing there, Sean, too, that we don't talk about is survivors who are married to police officers. Who do they then call when domestic violence? When the person who is causing the harm is a police officer, who do they call? There's many survivors that we've known in the community in this state, in Minnesota, and in our local communities and counties where survivors have had to navigate, have had to call other counties, or aren't sure who they should be reporting it to. And then on top of that, if he is convicted of domestic violence, but yet he still works as a police officer, he still gets access to guns and weapons. Right. And so that's been a tenuous, I think over the years, it's been a tenuous conversation that we haven't been able to navigate, I think, totally well. And the systems and policies haven't actually done really well in terms of navigating when the harm doers and the people who are causing the harm are the police. Right? And some of those survivors just don't feel safe. Oh, I'm going to call his buddies to stop him. Who are they going to believe? Right? Exactly to your point there, Sean, is that perhaps he can't do that. He's a police officer. He's one of the good guys. Or maybe you didn't do something and he just blew up. To Serrano's point there, maybe the two of you were just having a regular or normal fight. It's not domestic violence, right? So I think that complexity, just highlighting that even further, not only to the experiences and lifting up the experiences of trans and women of color who don't want to call the police. We know that there are many people who do call the police, and that is okay, because that is their choice. And then we know that there's many who don't actually call because they understand the ramifications. And the other part that we also know to be true is when you find out that that person is actually somebody you love that's committing that harm towards you, are you going to really call the police on them? You want to see dad locked up in jail? You want to see uncle, locked up in prison? Is that the kind of consequence that you want? And so survivors have to think through these things, right? Like that's why it's not easy to just, to your point there, Sean, it's not easy to like just up and leave or just call the police or just call for help, right? Because they have to think through all these things about what's going to happen. What is the family going to say if I outed dad in this way, right? Or if I told everybody in the family that my husband is beating on me every day, or abusing me every day? What is the family going to say? Now I have to live with it. So now, or now he becomes homeless, right? Where is he going to live? Who's he going to live with? So she's constantly thinking about all those things. And I remember specifically even about one of the survivors sharing with us, Lavon Morris Grant, right, who we had come and do a keynote 2 years ago at our summit. And she was talking about how her husband shot her And while she was on the operating table at the hospital, while they were taking a bullet out of her, and her husband was laying dead next to her, she was already thinking through his funeral, planning what that was going to look like. So this is the intensity, just to give some flavor, quote unquote, or some ideas to raise more awareness, is that survivors, it's not that survivors are just twiddling their thumb every day and don't know how to move. They're constantly thinking every single day about what moves they should make, and then what the repercussions are, and what is actually the best move. Because the choices that they have, I'll tell you all, and you two know this very well too, is that it's not easy. It is not easy, because you're tearing your family apart. Where are the kids going to go? What are the kids going to think about dad? Who are the kids going to believe? Does it make me a bad mother? I have to work through my own shame and guilt before I can even talk about like the violence that is happening towards me and this family, right? There's so much, and I think that that's why for survivors, you know, sort of like amplifying their experiences here, is that it's not as easy as just call the police. Why didn't you leave? If it was that bad, you could have seek help. No, she thought through all of that already. She made the choice that she made because she thought through all of that. And the choice, and every choice that she made, she had to think about the safety for herself and the safety for her kids, if she had kids. Right? And we don't think about that.
Yeah, this stuff is hard to think about. I mean, even for those of us who do this work, you know, every day, and just it's hard work. I mean, it's hard work to actually take the time to like pull your head up out of the sand and try to learn about something like this. Because I think it's just so much easier for all of us to just remain blissfully unaware or ignorant or whatever. And so many of us, I don't think are willfully making that choice to like, I'm going to stay ignorant, you know, like I'm going to wake up and be ignorant today of all the world's problems, right? Because we all have our things that we're dealing with and struggling with all the time, right? But yeah, I was just thinking about like, you know, not pushing, but like bringing awareness, helping to like name some of these things. I think for me, it just highlights areas in my own life, and it makes me think of like things within my own family and you know, within the church that I grew up in, you know, just like so many different things. And it's hard to think about, and it's even harder for me to actually like feel the feelings that come with it too. Like when I think about what it must be like for someone who's surviving domestic violence, you know, every day, the fear that that person would be living with just constantly. It's like I can't even actually go there and feel it. It's hard to even think about it, you know. And so just want to like lift that up, that it's like this conversation is not easy, I think, for any of us to have, and we have them pretty regularly, you know. And so I don't know, want to like lift that up, that like there are no like quote unquote right answers. There's no one right way that a survivor can like respond to violence, that a community can, you know, help that person or help that family. And so I guess I'm just, yeah, I guess I'm just feeling grateful for like having the connections that I do with people like you know, both of you on this call. And I feel like it just, everything comes back to that for me. Like, do we continue to choose to stay isolated within our own people, our own families, or are we actually like trying to build these relationships, these connections together where we can like actually talk about the hard stuff that's going on? So feeling overwhelmed with some of the heaviness of today's conversation, and also just grateful that I don't have to like think about this on my own. Like I can actually reach out and connect to people in community who want to talk about these things that are really happening.
It's like awareness is one of those like slow, but like, you know, rabbit that'll win the race, because it is true. Like, and then like to say very clearly, like, if you're also not experiencing that, man, like I'm not gonna pretend like it's hard for the average person who's not experiencing that to have that, to think of even having that conversation. So, nah, hell no, I don't even think that anybody like is choosing to like, you know, want to neglect it. But yeah, it is that awareness, and how do you bring it in a way that's like to where they understand it and they understand like what they can possibly do if needed, right? Like, but I think that awareness is the key thing, because most people, when they think about when they hit the awareness part, they're like, all right, now I know. I can't just not know. What do I do with this knowing, right? Um, and maybe it is for now, just like the one-offs, because I know one of you asked the question earlier about like, you know, what do you do like in a large scale and a small scale? Maybe just like one-offs, like I do, because I do have some friends like that. And a blessing, and I love like this. I say a blessing for real, for real. Like I've been actually able to like challenge and change their opinions on these ideas, and one of them comes to me a lot more often now, like emotionally, like, and it literally patches me up every time, because I also see that that's true, but it's hard to see, right? Because it's my friend, not yours, not all the people who've been through violence can see that too, right? So I think it is weird about, because once you get the awareness, you're like, okay, well, what do I do with this? I'm not a teacher, I'm not a health consultant. Most people are not. Most people are, you're like, not average day, because everybody's like on this here, you know, beautiful and shit, but just the average person who doesn't have those conversations. So bringing that awareness into kind of their field too, like kind of making them like using that empathy to kind of have them like kind of understand it through their emotional lens too. I think sometimes that logical lens is too much for people, because then they'll go, because then logically they'll be like, well, why didn't she just leave, right? And that's where that comes from. So I think like maybe like pulling on the empathy and the because that's how I do it. I guess I can't really tell somebody how to. I would literally, if it's one of my friends, I'll switch the plot and then put him as the person, and deeply like, even if I gotta cry to get it out, like just deeply like have him understand like that he's actually in trouble now, like what he's going through, like what things that he has to do to get himself out of trouble. Um, but yeah, like how do you do that, right? Like how do you do that with all the people? How do you do that with the people that are connected to you? How do you stay connected, right? Like Pang hit a great question about like, are you gonna call the cops for your uncle? And even if you do, that's your uncle. You gotta stay connected. And what does that look like? You know, it doesn't look like the part where you just shun him, and you know, when he gets out, you just move the whole family across the town and never speak to him again. That can't be what it looks like, you know. So what does even that reconnection look like after you've developed you have done these things to your partner, if you've acted in a way that has not benefited your partner, your relationship? So I think just more of these conversations, like it helps bring more of these good questions, and then we even authentically answer the questions ourselves, and then that brings up more questions. So I always just love having these conversations, because that way maybe we even say it differently. I even so energy riddle sometimes, like I'm like, maybe even the third time I'll say it different, and somebody will be like, oh shit, I heard it the third time, and the first two times wasn't good enough, and maybe he didn't say that like that word enough. But so I think like just bringing that, yeah, strong word for sure, is that awareness. But it's hard to understand that. It's hard for you to also tell somebody who's going through that to be like, we just gotta wait for them to understand it, or we gotta, you know. But great conversation, and I thank y'all for also, yeah, not being able to have this alone and being able to, because yeah, it immediately is like an insight to yourself, and I think that's what men, people who identify as men need to do, and they will do every time, because most of this conversation, if you're accountable, and when like you are, it leads you to look inside yourself. Do I do any of these things? Like, where do these things come from? Like even my anger that's not with my partner, with my friends, with anybody, where does that even come from? So I just love having these conversations, because I always think I'd rather have these until I die instead of like not having them at all. Because I think at least some point, some way down the line, something's gonna click for them. So I thank y'all for this too.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate both of you and the ones who are joining us again. We've missed you all, and I missed this space as well too. And really appreciating this conversation that helps me really reground back into the roots of domestic violence and how it actually happens. And probably you could tell that I was very committed and passionate at points and very sad at other points as well too, because it's just so complex. But I'll leave it there, and I hope that folks can continue the conversation, and I will leave it to Sean to close us out here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just another big thank you to all of you who have been able to tune in to our conversation, whether you're watching live or you're watching a week from now in the future, whatever that means. That'll be the past then. But yeah, just grateful to be here. We also want to take a minute to thank our funding partners, who are Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota and the Novo Foundation, for all of their support and partnership and helping us continue these really important conversations between men and masculine people, and what that looks like for us to show up in healthy and safe ways within our communities. And as a reminder, we hold these conversations every other Thursday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time for an hour. So our next conversation will be 2 weeks from today on October 21st at noon. So we'll hope you'll tune in and join us then. Topic to be determined, but it'll be another good conversation with our folks here. So thanks again for all of you who follow us. Don't forget to like our page on Facebook. You can also connect with us on YouTube and watch all of our previous conversations. So check them out. We got some good stuff in there. And again, thank you all for joining us, and we wish you all well and that you take care.